This video is for educational purposes only, not medical advice. Always consult your doctor before making any dietary or lifestyle changes. In the Gospel of John, during the crucifixion, Jesus says simply, "I thirst." What's offered to him in that moment isn't water. It's sour wine, a diluted vinegar drink that Roman soldiers themselves carried and drank, called posca, valued specifically for how effectively it cut thirst in extreme heat and exertion. It's mentioned again in Matthew's Gospel too, offered on a sponge. This ordinary soldier's drink, not a delicacy, was considered the practical answer to real, desperate thirst. Arthur keeps a box of electrolyte powder packets on top of his refrigerator. Tears one open most mornings, stirs it into a glass of water, drinks it before he's even had his coffee. He couldn't tell you what's actually in it beyond electrolytes, and he's certainly never heard that Roman soldiers were drinking something remarkably similar 2,000 years before a single packet existed. Here's something Arthur has never considered. Every ingredient in that packet, sodium, potassium, natural sugars for absorption, existed already in ordinary foods and drinks people relied on long before anyone thought to isolate them into a powder. 6 of those drinks are sitting in the Bible right now, mentioned by name, in stories about people who needed exactly what Arthur's packet promises, working fields and crossing deserts with nothing but what grew around them. By the end of this video, you'll have 6 of them, including the exact drink offered in that moment on the cross, and still just as easy to make in your own kitchen tonight. If you're new here, subscribe to Ancestral Fix. Every week we find what the ancient world knew and what your body still needs. Stay with me. Before we start, here's the actual mechanism behind why any of this works, because it helps to understand what you're actually replacing. Proper hydration isn't just about water. Sodium and potassium, the core of what's in Arthur's packet, help the body actually hold on to and absorb fluid, rather than passing it straight through. And a small amount of natural sugar helps the body absorb both the water and those minerals more efficiently through the intestinal wall. That's essentially the entire science behind a modern electrolyte drink. The whole reason the packet exists in the first place. None of it required a lab, a patent, or a factory. It just required knowing which ordinary foods already carried those exact ingredients, long before anyone thought to isolate and repackage them. Number 6, barley water. Barley was one of the most common grains in ancient Israel, tough enough to grow where wheat struggled, and simmering it in water to make a mild, slightly starchy drink has a long history across the ancient Mediterranean and Middle East, valued specifically as a gentle way to replace fluids during illness or after physical exertion. Simmer a quarter cup of barley in 4 cups of water for 20 minutes, strain out the grain, and drink the remaining liquid plain or with a little lemon and honey. It's mild, easy on the stomach, even when little else sounds appealing, and was exactly the kind of drink offered to someone recovering from a long, difficult day or a fever that had left them depleted. Number 5, date water. Dates appear throughout the Old Testament as a symbol of abundance, and they're also naturally high in potassium, one of the 2 core minerals in any electrolyte drink, alongside a meaningful amount of natural sugar that helps the body absorb that potassium efficiently. Soaking a handful of pitted dates in water overnight, then blending briefly and straining, produces a naturally sweet, mineral-rich drink that desert travelers relied on for both energy and hydration during long journeys across dry terrain, long before anyone called it an electrolyte drink at all, simply because it was what worked and what was available in an environment with very little else. Arthur has never once made anything from scratch that took overnight soaking. But this one takes about 90 seconds of actual effort. Spread across a day, he's not paying attention to it anyway. We're halfway there, and every one of these costs pennies compared to a box of powder packets. Number 3, cucumber and melon water. In the book of Numbers, the Israelites in the wilderness specifically remember and crave the cucumbers and melons of Egypt, naming them individually alongside onions, leeks, and garlic. Both cucumber and melon are made up mostly of water, along with a meaningful amount of potassium, which is part of why infusing water with sliced cucumber and a little melon, left to sit for an hour in the refrigerator, produces a naturally hydrating, mildly mineral-rich drink. If a plate of cucumbers was worth complaining to God about in the middle of an actual desert, cucumber water is worth a try in your own kitchen. Number 2, milk. In the book of Genesis, Abraham personally serves curds and milk to 3 visitors under the terebinth trees at Mamre, offering it as a central part of genuine hospitality, not an afterthought tossed in alongside the main meal. Milk naturally contains both sodium and potassium alongside protein, which is part of why some modern research on post-exercise recovery has actually looked at milk as a rehydration option, comparing favorably to some commercial sports drinks in certain studies looking at fluid retention afterward. A simple glass of milk, something Arthur already has in his refrigerator without ever thinking of it as a hydration drink, was doing at least part of what that powder packet does, 3,000 years before Abraham's tent had a refrigerator to keep it cold in, let alone a grocery store to buy it from. Which brings us to number 1. This is the one from the very beginning, the drink offered on the cross. Vinegar water. In the book of Ruth, chapter 2, long before that moment on the cross, Boaz invites Ruth to sit with his workers at mealtime and offers her bread dipped in vinegar, a small, specific detail that tells us vinegar was a genuine part of a working meal for field laborers in ancient Israel, not a rare condiment reserved for special occasions. That same diluted vinegar drink, posca, was standard issue for Roman soldiers centuries later, valued specifically for how effectively it cut thirst in extreme heat and exertion, which is exactly why it was what a soldier reached for at the foot of the cross when asked for something to drink. Not out of cruelty alone. It was simply the drink already in his hand, the practical answer to real thirst that Roman soldiers carried on every march. A tablespoon of raw apple cider vinegar stirred into a glass of water, with a small spoonful of honey if you want it, makes a simple, tart drink that connects a tired field in Ruth's story to a Roman soldier's canteen to one of the most significant moments in the entire Bible. The same basic drink, doing the same basic job for thousands of years. Now, before you throw out every electrolyte packet in your cabinet, that's not what this is about. Commercial electrolyte packets are convenient, precisely measured, and genuinely useful in situations involving significant fluid loss, like extended illness, heavy sweating, or medical guidance following a doctor's specific recommendation. What we're talking about is Arthur's everyday default, the one he reaches for most mornings out of habit rather than genuine need, and whether one of these simpler, whole ingredient options might serve just as well on an ordinary day. One thing worth mentioning. If you have kidney disease, heart failure, or any condition affecting fluid or electrolyte balance, homemade hydration drinks should be discussed with your doctor first, since the right balance of sodium and potassium varies significantly by individual health situation, and too much of either can be a genuine problem for some conditions. There's something worth sitting with in the fact that every single ingredient in Arthur's modern packet already existed, freely available, in foods people were eating and drinking thousands of years before anyone thought to isolate them into a measured powder. Nothing about rehydration is actually new. We just started buying the same minerals back in a more expensive, more processed form, with a brand name and a marketing budget attached to something that used to just be dinner. It's worth noticing, too, that every single one of these 6 drinks came from food that was already sitting in someone's kitchen or field. Nobody in these stories went looking for a special hydration solution. Ruth was simply offered what the other workers were already eating. Abraham served what he already had on hand for honored guests. The Israelites craved what had already been part of their ordinary diet back in Egypt. The pattern was an invention. It was simply paying attention to what the body needed and reaching for what was already close at hand. This is really the same quiet theme running through so much of what we cover on this channel. It's rarely about a single product being good or bad. It's about noticing that the actual mechanism behind something modern and packaged usually already existed in plain, ordinary food, quietly doing the same job for a lot longer than the branded version has been on the shelf. Let's come back to where we started. Arthur, tearing open a packet most mornings before he's even had his coffee, never once wondering what was actually inside it. And 6 drinks, some of them thousands of years old, one of them offered in the most significant moment in the entire Bible, doing essentially the same job his packet does, sitting quietly in his own kitchen the entire time. If there's one thing to take from today, let it be this. Sometimes the modern solution isn't new science. It's just an old, ordinary answer, repackaged and sold back to us at a markup. This video is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always consult your doctor before making changes to your hydration routine, especially if you have kidney disease, heart failure, or any condition affecting fluid or electrolyte balance. If this kind of ancestral wisdom speaks to you, consider subscribing, because next time We're looking at a weapon the Byzantine Empire used for 800 years that was so effective and so secret, the formula disappeared when the empire fell. We'd love to have you along.